The second Makkah, the second plague in Mitzrayim, as we know, was the Makkah of Sephardeia, frogs. There were two ways that the frogs came to Mitzrayim. One way was that the drops of water that were in the Nile River turned to frogs and swarmed the entire Mitzrayim. But there was also a huge big frog, our rabbis tell us, that came to Mitzrayim, that the Egyptians tried to hit it, try to kill it, and every time they hit that frog, hundreds, maybe even thousands of frogs came swarming out to go all over Mitzrayim and everywhere. On a side point, our rabbis ask a question. If a person sees that when he does something, bad keeps happening from what he's doing, and he's suffering more from what he's doing, then obviously they would stop. Why would the Egyptians continue to hit that big frog if it's just making their life more miserable? The answer is, sometimes when people get upset, they do things that doesn't make sense, that they don't want to do. They kept hitting that frog out of anger. It's making their life miserable, but they couldn't think straight. We have to not be like the Egyptians. Obviously, we're all great, Baruch Hashem. But when people get angry and upset, they get so upset sometimes they do things that they regret later on. So obviously, we should try never to get upset, especially nowadays before the holiday while we're at home. So the Egyptians were suffering from these frogs. When the Makkah of frogs started, Moshe once again told Aharon to hit the river because the river saved Moshe, and Moshe couldn't go and not have gratitude for the water that saved him so many years ago, as we mentioned in the Makkah of Dam. So Aharon hits the river. There's frogs all over Mitzrayim. The big frog and all the other frogs. The people of Mitzrayim were not able to sleep at nights because of the loud noise that the frogs were making. The frogs were in their beds, as we know. They were all over the place. They couldn't sleep at night for all the days of the Makkah of Sephardeia. That's one of the reasons why Hashem brought the Makkah of Sephardeia to the Egyptians, because when they made the Jewish people slaves and they made them work, and as we know they punished them and hurt them, so they didn't let them sleep at nights. And when a person can't sleep at night, they're even more cranky and they can't even function. And the Egyptians, because they didn't let us sleep at nights, that's why now they also have this punishment of not being able to sleep at nights with all this noise. Another reason why Hashem brought the Makkah of Sephardeia, of frogs, onto the Egyptians was because, for fun, the Egyptians used to make the Jewish people catch all kinds of slimy creatures from the Nile River. If they don't catch, let's say 20, they get punished. It's not easy, especially for the older people, to catch a slimy creature. They go so fast and they slip out of your hands. Hashem says, if you guys want those slimy creatures, I'll send you the Sephardeia, and that's another reason why Hashem sent the Makkah of Sephardeia to Mitzrayim. There were a bunch of frogs that went all over the place, but there was a group of frogs that went into the ovens. Obviously, we never go near an oven. Obviously, we never go anywhere not safe. But the frogs knew that the ovens were hot. The frogs knew that they're going to get burned. But they said to do the will of Hashem. They didn't make any excuses, and they even jumped into the ovens while the ovens were on. Which teaches us another lesson. Sometimes when we're asked to do something by a parent or a family member or a morah or a rabbi, whatever it might be, sometimes we might make excuses. It's too hard, I can't do this, I can't do that. Your parent says, please go upstairs and get this for me. And some people out there very far away, obviously not us, they start to make all kinds of excuses. If the frogs did not make an excuse, they went into the ovens because Hashem told them to, Obviously, we don't do anything dangerous, but when our parents or our rabbis, whoever it might be, asks us to do something, obviously, we should also go right away without making all kinds of excuses. As a matter of fact, many years later, when Nebuchadnezzar took the Jewish people out of Jerusalem and brought them to Babel, he took a stage with a huge statue. Our rabbis tell us it must have been 60 amot, which is approximately over 120 feet. And he made 3 rabbis come onto stage, and he tells the rabbis, if you don't bow down to this idol, you're going to be thrown into the fire. The rabbis said to themselves, if the frogs in Mitzrayim went into the fire for Hashem, then obviously we don't bow down to the idol. We will do the same, just like Abraham Avinu. And the rabbis were thrown in by Nebuchadnezzar, and they were saved just like Abraham Avinu was saved when he was a young boy, when Nimrod threw him into the fire. Now, obviously, I don't even have to say this, but we never go near fire. We never go near anything dangerous, right? This was way back then for different reasons. We always have to be safe, no matter what it is. But they learned not to make excuses from the frogs of Mitzrayim. How much more so we have to do the same. The wizards of Paro, they lied to Paro with the makkah of dam, with the makkah of blood, to make believe they were able to do it, but they didn't really do it. Paro asked them in the makkah of Sephardeia, could you guys do this? And they said, of course. They took their witchcraft, their wands, whatever it was, and they made frogs come. They made believe to Paro that they created those frogs, but they so did not. They were able to call the frogs however they did it, but there's only one creator, as we mentioned, and that creator is Hashem. The frogs, at the end of the Makkah, they all died except for the ones that went into the ovens, because they did that for Hashem. At the end of the Makkah as well, Moshe comes to Paro and he asks him, when do you want me to get rid of the Makkah? It was at the end of 7 days. 7 days of torture. 7 days of misery. And Moshe tells Paro at the end of 7 days, when do you want me to get rid of it? And Paro says, tomorrow. Moshe says, tomorrow? You got it. Why in heaven's name would Paro say tomorrow? He's suffering so much. If somebody, God forbid, is suffering so much, why would he say tomorrow instead of right now? Paro wanted to make Moshe look like he's not in total control. You see, by the makkah of dam, by the plague of blood, the makkah was there for 7 days. Moshe Rabbeinu goes to Goshen for 7 days, comes back at the end of 7 days to Paro, and he says, Paro, when should I get rid of it? Paro says, right now. And Moshe says, okay, and the blood disappeared from Egypt. Paro was thinking to himself that the makkah comes, it only comes for 7 days. It's going to be over once the night of the 7th day comes. He sees Moshe come to ask him, Paro, when should I get rid of it? Paro had a feeling it was going to be over in 2 minutes, just like the dam, just like the blood. So he tells Moshe tomorrow. Moshe is going to have to say, okay, tomorrow, if that's what you want, that's what you'll get. But guess what? It will be over in 2 minutes, Paro thought. And he wanted to make Moshe look like he can't really control when the plague will end. But when Moshe told him tomorrow, and I'll see you, guess what? The makkah of frogs stayed for one more additional day. And Paro had the makkah of frogs for 8 days instead of 7. From that day on, he started realizing not to try to mess with Moshe and Hashem, that everything Moshe says is going to happen is going to happen. And that's why it says in the Makkah of Sephardeia, Paro says tomorrow, and from that day on, every other Makkah was 7 days, just like the Makkah of Dam. Frogs were 8 days, the rest were 7 days, but when it came to Makkah Choshech, which we'll get to, it was only for 6 days, because the 7th day Hashem saved it for when the Egyptians were in the Yam Suf. They tried to chase after the Jewish people. Hashem brought the Makkah of Hoshech, the 7th day, on the Egyptians, so they couldn't see, they couldn't chase after the Jewish people, and we'll talk about them more in the Makkah of Hoshech. Keep up the great work, have a beautiful day, and Bezrat Hashem will continue with other Makkot in the next few days.